Rebecca hadn't set foot in her childhood home for over a decade. And yet, as she stood on the front porch, staring at the chipped blue paint on the door, it was as if time had folded in on itself. The house still smelled of old wood and faint traces of her mother's lavender perfume. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. The funeral had been earlier that morning, small, quiet. Her father's absence should have felt final, but instead, it lingered like a question left unanswered. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no last words exchanged. Just the closing of a phase she never fully understood. She stepped inside. The house greeted her with silence. Dust floated in the light filtering through the lace curtains, untouched memories hanging in the air. Her mother, Amelia, had barely spoken since the service. She sat stiffly in the living room, hands folded, as if bracing herself for something unspoken. "I'll start packing up Dad's study," Rebecca murmured, needing an escape. Amelia only nodded. The study was exactly as she remembered. Bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with old novels, encyclopedias, and stacks of yellowed papers. Her father had always been a man of order, of logic. He believed in facts, not emotions. Maybe that's why she had never truly understood him. She ran her fingers along the spines of books, breathing in the musty scent of paper. That's when she saw it. A single envelope, tucked between the pages of a worn leather journal. The paper was aged, the ink slightly smudged, but the words were clear. "Amelia, there are things I should have said a long time ago." Rebecca's pulse quickened. Her father had written this to her mother, but it had never been sent. She hesitated. This letter, whatever it contained, was a piece of something unfinished, a thread leading back to a truth she had never known, and the truth had a way of changing everything. The letter felt heavier than paper should. Rebecca sat on the floor, her back against the bookshelf, staring at the words on the page. The ink had faded in places, but the message remained intact, a voice from the past, breaking through the silence of the present. She traced the opening line with her finger. "There are things I should have said a long time ago." She had spent most of her life believing that her father left without looking back, that divorce had been an ending, clean and irreversible. But if he had written this, if he had wrestled with unspoken words, then maybe the story she had told herself wasn't the full truth. The room felt smaller now, the weight of memory pressing in. She could almost hear the echoes of arguments that had once filled this house, raised voices behind closed doors, the sound of her mother crying late at night, and always the same question. Why wasn't love enough to keep them together? She folded the letter, her hands unsteady. She should ask her mother about it, demand answers. But where would she even begin? Instead, she tucked the letter into her pocket and rose to her feet. Outside the study, the house felt colder. Amelia was still in the living room, staring at nothing in particular. The weight of time sat heavy on her shoulders. Rebecca hesitated. "Mom?" Her mother glanced up, eyes tired. "Yes?" For a moment the words hovered on the edge of Rebecca's lips. "I found something." But something in her mother's expression, something guarded, almost fragile, made her swallow them back down. "Never mind," she said instead. Amelia only nodded, as if she had been expecting that. Rebecca turned away, but the unanswered questions followed her like shadows. Some stories were never told in full. Some truths stayed buried. But Rebecca wasn't sure she could leave this one untouched. Because if she had been wrong about the past, then what else had she been wrong about? The letter sat on Rebecca's nightstand, untouched since she had folded it away. But it lived in her mind, unraveling memories she hadn't thought about in years. She hadn't forgotten the divorce. Not really. It had shaped too much of her life to ever be forgotten. But she had locked away the details, telling herself that remembering wouldn't change anything. Now, she wasn't so sure. Morning light streamed through the curtains, painting golden patterns across the wooden floor. The house was quiet, except for the occasional sound of her mother moving around downstairs. Rebecca reached for the letter again. This time, she read it slowly. "I never wanted to walk away, Amelia. You think I didn't care, but you were wrong. I just didn't know how to fix what was already broken. And maybe you didn't either." The words unsettled her. They didn't match the father she had built in her mind, the distant, cold man who had let everything fall apart without a fight. Had she been wrong? The thought followed her downstairs. She found her mother in the kitchen, staring out the window as she stirred a cup of tea. The lines on Amelia's face seemed deeper in the morning light. "Could we talk?" Rebecca asked, sliding into a chair. Her mother's fingers tightened around the ceramic mug. "About what?" Rebecca hesitated. "Dad, the divorce." Amelia let out a breath, setting the mug down carefully, as if she needed a moment to steady herself. "I thought we agreed to leave that in the past." "You agreed," Rebecca corrected. "I never did." Silence stretched between them. Finally, her mother sighed. "What do you want to know?" Rebecca reached into her pocket and placed the letter on the table. Amelia's face didn't change. She simply stared at it for a long moment, before carefully unfolding the paper. Her eyes scanned the words, her expression unreadable. When she finally looked up, there was something distant in her gaze. "Where did you find this? In his study?" Another pause. Then, softly, "I never saw this letter." The confession caught Rebecca off guard. "So he never gave it to you?" Amelia shook her head. "Number." She smoothed a hand over the paper, as if trying to smooth out something far deeper than creases. "I suppose he thought it was too late." Rebecca studied her mother, waiting for more. But Amelia only stared at the letter, lost in thought. Rebecca clenched her hands together. "Mom, was I wrong about him?" Her mother closed her eyes briefly, as if the question itself was too heavy. Then she opened them and met Rebecca's gaze. "You only saw pieces of what happened, Rebecca. But no child ever sees the full story." Rebecca had spent her life believing her father was the one who left, the one who gave up, the one who made the choice. But now, sitting across from her mother, she wasn't sure anymore. Amelia traced the rim of her mug, eyes distant. "Your father and I didn't end because we stopped loving each other. We ended because we didn't know how to love each other the right way." Rebecca frowned. "What does that mean?" Her mother sighed. "It means that love isn't always enough." She shook her head, as if remembering something painful. "We were young when we married, too young, and we both carried wounds we didn't know how to heal. I wanted him to be someone he didn't know how to be. He wanted me to be someone I wasn't. And we thought marriage would fix everything. But it didn't," Rebecca said quietly. It didn't." A lump formed in Rebecca's throat. "So, you both gave up?" Amelia hesitated. "I think, in our own ways, we did." Rebecca had spent years blaming one person. But what if divorce wasn't about one person failing? What if it was about two people who had tried their best, only to find that their best still wasn't enough? She swallowed hard. "Did he ever try to come back?" Her mother's expression softened. There were moments, but by then too much had been said. Too much had been done. She glanced at the letter again. Maybe he thought this letter was too little, too late. Rebecca didn't know what to say. She had always believed that the divorce had been a clean break, one decision that changed everything. But now she saw the truth. Divorce wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 little moments, a slow unraveling, a love that had been fraying at the edges long before the final thread snapped. And suddenly, she wasn't sure how to feel about any of it. Rebecca sat in the living room long after her mother had gone upstairs, the letter still resting on the table. The house felt heavier now, thick with the weight of unspoken words. Her entire life, she had believed a version of the divorce that was simple, clean, and in hindsight, completely incomplete. The story had always been straightforward. Her father left, her mother suffered, and she had been caught in the wreckage. But what if the truth was more complicated? She picked up the letter again, running her fingers over the creases. "We both made mistakes." She had spent years seeing her father as the one who failed, but her mother's words echoed in her mind. No child ever sees the full story. She needed more than just her mother's version. That night, she made a call she hadn't planned on making. Her brother Daniel picked up after the second ring. "Rebecca?" "Hey," she said, suddenly unsure why she had called. They weren't exactly close. Divorce had done that, split not just their parents but their family. "Everything okay?" Rebecca hesitated. "Do you ever think about the divorce?" Silence, then a sigh. "Rebecca, It's been over 20 years. I know, she admitted. But I'm realizing there's a lot I don't know. Daniel didn't answer right away. She could hear him shifting on the other end, the faint sound of a television playing in the background. Dad didn't just leave, he finally said. I mean, he did, but it wasn't like he wanted to. Rebecca's grip on the phone tightened. So why did he? Because Mom made it impossible for him to stay. The words hit her harder than she expected. Daniel sighed. Look, I know she was hurting, but she made sure he paid for it. Every argument, every conversation, she controlled how we saw him. And it worked. Rebecca stared at the letter, her stomach twisting. Had she been blind to it all? Daniel spoke again, softer this time. I think he wanted to fight for us. I think he just didn't know how. Rebecca felt something shift inside her. She had spent years carrying her father's absence like a wound. But what if his absence had been the result of something deeper, something she had never been old enough to understand? And more importantly, what if it wasn't just about him? She hung up with Daniel and sat in the silence of the house. For the first time, she saw the divorce for what it really was. Not just one person's failure, but two people's brokenness colliding. And she wasn't sure if she was ready to forgive either of them. Forgiveness was not something Rebecca had ever considered. Not for her father, not for her mother. But the more she uncovered, the more she realized she'd been holding on to a version of the past that wasn't entirely true. And holding on to that version had kept her from something she didn't even know she needed, peace. The next morning, she found herself at the cemetery. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. Her father's gravestone was simple, just his name, the years he lived, and nothing else. She pulled the letter from her coat pocket, unfolding it with careful fingers. I don't know why you never sent this, she murmured. Maybe you thought it wouldn't matter. She swallowed hard, staring down at the words he had written so long ago. Maybe you didn't know how to fix what was already broken. Rebecca let out a slow breath. I think I understand that now. She had spent years blaming him, years believing he hadn't tried. But maybe trying looked different for everyone. And maybe she had never really understood what trying had meant for him. She knelt down, pressing the letter gently against the cold stone. I'm still angry, she admitted. But I don't want to carry it anymore. The words felt like a release, like something shifting inside her. She stayed there for a long time, the wind whispering around her, carrying away the weight of old wounds. When she finally stood, she felt lighter. Forgiveness wasn't forgetting. It wasn't excusing. It was choosing to move forward. And for the first time, Rebecca was ready to take that step. Rebecca had always believed that divorce had stolen something from her. It had taken her family and split it in half. It had left her with a mother who carried silent wounds, and a father who had become a distant shadow. It had shaped the way she loved, the way she trusted, the way she feared loss. For years, she had held on to it as proof of everything that had gone wrong. But now, as she walked back into her childhood home, something felt different. Her mother was in the kitchen again, this time sorting through old photographs. A worn shoebox sat on the table, filled with memories that had been tucked away for decades. Some were bent at the edges, others faded with time. Amelia glanced up as Rebecca entered. I thought you might want to see these. Rebecca hesitated before sitting down. She picked up a photo of her parents, young and laughing, standing close together. It was from a time before everything unraveled, before the divorce. Before they became two people who could no longer stand in the same room without tension thickening the air. I forgot they were ever happy, Rebecca admitted. Her mother gave a sad smile. So did I. The confession lingered between them. Amelia traced the edge of a photo of her wedding day. Divorce changes people, Rebecca. It breaks things that can't always be put back together. Rebecca swallowed. Did you ever regret it? Her mother's fingers stilled. I regret the way we hurt each other. I regret that we didn't know how to fix what was breaking before it shattered. She sighed. But do I regret the divorce itself? A long pause. Then, softly, number. Rebecca exhaled, absorbing the weight of that truth. Maybe divorce had been necessary. Maybe it had saved them from destroying each other even more. Maybe the pain of separation had been less than the pain of staying in something that was already fractured beyond repair. It didn't make it easier, but it made it make sense. She ran her fingers over an old family picture, her parents standing behind her and Daniel, hands resting on their small shoulders. She was smiling in the photo, but now she wondered what had been happening behind those expressions. What quiet struggles had been shaping the people she thought she knew? Looking at her mother now, she realized something. She wasn't the only one who had been carrying this weight. Rebecca reached for her mother's hand. "I don't want to be angry anymore." Amelia's gaze softened. "Neither do I." A small, shaky breath left Rebecca's lips. "Then maybe it's time we let it go." Her mother squeezed her hand. "Maybe it is." And just like that, the weight of divorce, of years spent blaming, resenting, and holding on to a past that could never be changed, began to lift. Rebecca knew it wouldn't disappear overnight. There would still be moments of sadness, of wondering what could have been. But for the first time, she wasn't stuck in that past. She was stepping forward. And for the first time in her life, the shadow of divorce no longer defined her.